Hi, listeners. This is From Ideology to Unity, a spiritual journey where we let go of ideological doctrine in favor of meaning, purpose, and unity as a whole. I'm here with Chenoa Johnston from the podcast Sex and Satori, an interesting cross section of sexuality, spirituality, and healing. Hi, Chenoa.
Hi, Nick. How are you?
Oh, good. Yeah. Oh,
It's a beautiful day here in Vancouver where I live.
and it's a lovely overcast day here.
Yes, yeah. So I'm excited to be on your show. This is exciting for me to have to be interviewed. So
But your first interview, is it?
no, I've been interviewed before. I've been interviewed before, and yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah. As a matter of fact, I've been interviewed quite a lot by different PhD candidates at the University of British Columbia here,
Oh,
just about my life and my work. So that was interesting. Um, so yeah, I've been interviewed before, and I'm quite comfortable. I know some people are not always comfortable hearing about some of the difficult topics, especially if we get into some sexual trauma
right.
issues. Yeah.
So that brings us to what your podcast is about then.
Yeah, my podcast is Sex and Satori. Satori means enlightenment, and it's a kind of enlightenment which means about letting go of the flesh and coming into, becoming aware of spirit, of yourself as a spiritual being.
Hmm.
And I put it together with sex because I think our sexuality is an intimate part of our lives, and our spiritual path or beliefs is also a very intimate part of our lives. So to me, they come together um, because I mean, overall, if you look at society, there is a lot of sexual trauma in our society, and there is a lot of uh, spiritual problems, I suppose.
Oh, yeah.
That the religions of the day are not really meeting the spiritual needs of the population.
Is that why you think, is that why you'd say that belief has declined, or at least in the West?
And I'm not so sure it's like declined on a personal level. I haven't really looked at statistics at all, but the decline in attendance at church and being part of an established religion is definitely. I mean, when I grew up, everyone went to church, you know, and now very few people that I know attend church. I live in a Christian community, Christian culture, and I just feel that the religion is not serving the spiritual needs of the day, and um, and to be really of service to your community, it has to have a modern, a modern aspect to it that's going to actually serve the people dealing with living in a modern society. So anyways, yeah.
So you've got, from what I hear, you've had some difficult experiences regarding sexuality.
I did. I mean, right now I'm working as a sex and relationship coach and an intimacy guide, and I do body-centered therapy. And I went down that route. It was completely unexpected. I started my professional path. Uh, I did a huge change of profession and went back to school when I was 39 years old. And went to school for 2 years. And when I came out of that, I started working as this kind of a therapist. And it's kind of like a makeshift. I brought together a variety of different modalities that helped me in my healing journey, and I became certified in a couple of different healing techniques. And so that became my profession at 41 years old.
Oh, which techniques did you learn?
Well, I'm a yoga therapist. So yoga has been a big thing in my life. Uh, I'm a yoga teacher, a yoga therapist, a practitioner of shiatsu and brima and other massage techniques. Um, Yoga therapy was one of the ones that gave me a lot of insight into working the way that I do now. Because the yoga therapy training that I did included um, a lot of chakra analysis, and seeing the chakras as energetic centers that are, you know, are darkened, or they're unhealed, or they're just not working properly. And so the yoga therapy training that I did really helped to figure out which yoga pose would help someone with a specific problem. And then you would put them in that yoga pose um, and hold them there, and then do a specific talk therapy with them while they're in that yoga pose. And so as you're doing the talk therapy, they become consciously aware of what they're releasing during while doing this specific pose, while stretching one part of the body while I'm holding them down in another part. So I became really aware of how we can heal things can be healed that are stuck in our bodies without us being consciously aware of it.
Is these
Um,
psychological, spiritual things, or
yeah, for example, a very simple one. Uh, when I was in the yoga therapy training, I was being uh, I can't remember what my problem was. Like, we had to come up with a specific psychological problem, and the therapist decides which yoga pose to put them in. So they put me in a happy baby. Are you familiar with yoga at all?
yeah, I've done a little bit, not much. I know like the
Okay.
downward dog and stuff.
Yeah, so happy baby is where the you're laying flat on your back and your feet are in the air.
Oh, okay,
So it's really good for relaxing and opening the hips.
okay.
Okay. And so this person held me in happy baby pose and started talking me through identifying the colors that I felt coming out of my hip joint, identifying whatever physical pain there was. And as he talked me through it, all of a sudden I had a memory of being a baby and having my diaper changed and having my legs pinned down, and I was crying. So what was realized is that some of this old trauma, even from this simple experience of being pinned down and having your diaper changed as a baby, those memories can get stored in the body.
So all of us potentially have that.
All of us have all these kinds of memories stored in our body. And so that is what somatic education about. Somatic education is about. Somatic therapy is about tracing these emotional traumas through our body and healing them and letting and finding techniques to let go of them. Now, sometimes a way to let go of it might just be crying about it, having an emotional release, and sometimes a physical release. So coming back to yoga, when you do yoga, you could be releasing things that you have no idea that you're releasing, but that you feel better afterwards. And the more you do your yoga practice, the better you feel, or the more you do it in a routine, the better you feel. And so some of these practices, they're healing parts of yourself, meaning that you're letting go of stuck energy.
Right.
It's really just,
When you do
sorry?
yoga generally, can you get some of the benefits of somatic therapy indirectly?
Indirectly, yes. Because I mean, there's definitely a difference when you do a talk therapy a specific, in yoga therapy, for example, you do a specific kind of talk therapy with somebody to move through, to go to dig deeper. But if you're not doing therapy at all, definitely yoga, you know, it will help release some, uh, it will help release things without you even knowing that you're releasing them.
Huh.
I mean, that's kind of the same with almost any spiritual practice. The spiritual practices that I do, that I learned, um, there's a focus. The focus in my spiritual practice is on the third eye. Um, and so we don't do, in my personal spiritual practice, I don't do a lot of, you know, full body energetic healing stuff or focusing or anything like that. My pure spiritual practice is a is a meditative contemplative practice, and that through doing that, the side effect, one of the side effects is healing the rest of the body, or being guided towards modalities that will facilitate healing the rest of the body.
Okay. So
Yeah.
is it is it challenging to for people to open their third eye though?
Yes, I think for some people it is. Yeah. One of my early discoveries about the third eye, I started doing meditation practice when I was quite young, probably like 21, 20 years old, this kind of thing. And I read a series of books written by Lobsang Rampa. Have you heard of this fellow?
No.
Lobsang Rampa. He was a Tibetan Lama.
Actually,
And
I have vaguely heard of him through the Long Earth series by Terry Pratchett. It was mentioned.
okay, yeah, it was amazing stuff, this stuff. So he had left Tibet on a long journey. I think the Chinese had taken over or something, but he got out of Tibet. He ended up moving to Canada, and he wrote a series of books about his experience. And growing up as a Lama, he entered the monastery as a young child. In order to open their third eye, his third eye, he had a nail, like they took a nail and nailed it into the spot, like right between the eyebrows.
Really?
Really? They did some crazy practices. So, and when I read that, it made me really curious. Maybe that's why people have put the red dot there. Maybe that's from the
I
old practices.
I imagined
From,
there might be a connection. At least it's the same place as the third eye where the dot is.
yeah, and maybe they had a scar afterwards. You know, maybe people had a scar there.
I mean,
So
I
this,
don't really feel, because I feel a bit squeamish about that. Like,
yeah, for sure. I mean, I thought Lobsang Rampa's books were fascinating, um, but I certainly didn't want to. I didn't want to do that. Um, so for some people, it is much easier to open their third eye and have a spiritual experience than it is for other people. Um, it's there's just such a wide variety of experiences with the third eye. Yeah.
I heard that it requires opening the heart chakra to be able to get to the chakras above it.
I think in some practices that's true. I think so in Tantra, especially specifically, um, because Tantra. That's one of the things that I use in my therapy. I'm also a tantric therapist. I studied Tantra quite a bit. I think I first encountered Tantra when I was 21 years old, and through Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh. And but at the time I wasn't, you know, you hear about Tantra and you think sex, sex, sex. But when I first encountered Tantra, I knew nothing about the sexual practices. And the whole time that I was following Rajneesh in the early 80s, I had nothing to do with their sexual um, freedom, I guess you'd call it. I just I actually really relied heavily on the philosophy and the sort of the devotional practice of love, really.
So
And
it's about unconditional love, is it?
I think so. Yeah, I think so. Um, so yes, in Tantra, you use practices to, there are meditations, there's physical exercises, and there's breathing techniques. And so the breathing techniques will always include the heart center, opening the lungs, right? That always including the heart center. Um, the meditations will include, you can do different chakra meditations. So you'll either focus, you can focus on the heart or not totally focus on the heart. But yes, you're right. There has to be a heart opening. And really the heart opening is about letting go of fear. Because if you want to have a spiritual experience in the third eye, uh, there's a lot of fear that prevents people from having spiritual experiences because they're so attached to the body.
Yeah.
Um,
So,
so
I imagine healing, what you learned about how to heal spiritually from your experiences. I imagine it helped you recover from. Yeah.
well, just to get a little history of my experience, when I was younger, I grew up on the prairies. I had a beautiful childhood in many ways, but I also experienced a lot of sexual trauma as a child, a young child, and then as a teenager for many years. And even without knowing that spiritual practice or yoga could help me, I was, in my family life, there was, it was, I lived in a lot of fear, put it that way. But I had a recluse. I was able to go into my bedroom and close the door. And when I was a teenager, I started spontaneously doing yoga.
Huh.
And one of the poses that I did was shoulder stand. I would be in my bedroom. I'd be listening to Joni Mitchell and all these uh, modern songs, folk musicians, James Taylor, Cat Stevens, all this kind of music. And then I would do yoga, and I would do plow pose, and I would do um, shoulder stand. And I even remember leaning up against my bedroom wall with my feet up against the wall, trying to get my shoulder stand as straight up into the air as possible. And, I had no idea that this was helping me, really. I was a teenager. I was 16 years old. And then when I was in my late 30s and I did a yoga therapy training, I learned that the throat chakra is, you know, uh, different people that understand the spiritual anatomy and what the chakras mean. Some people have different ideas about what they mean, but for me, what I learned was the throat chakra obviously is about self-expression, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And in self-expression, you are you are you're aligning your own personal inner self, right, with in some regards with the outer world. You're trying to find an alignment of your inner self with the outer self through expressing yourself. And in the yoga therapy, I learned that if you have problems with the self-expression in any way, that shoulder stand is a powerful healing yoga pose to do.
And you
And that
instinctively
just,
knew.
pardon me?
So you instinctively knew that.
And I instinctively knew that when I was 16 years old. And so it just, the light bulb went off and I go, wow, I was really trying to heal my own voice. Um, because when you go through sexual trauma, something that happens is that you get silenced. And so, I didn't have a voice. I was living a secret world, and I was afraid to speak up. And, I was living a double life, so to speak. And so, without even knowing it, I was intuitively doing this practice to help heal myself.
That's amazing. It's
Isn't
amazing.
it?
That's,
And the light bulb didn't go off until I was like 30, about that specific thing, until I was like 38 years old, 39 years old. So yeah, it's funny that when you start on the healing path, and especially if you bring in spiritual practice, you learn things about yourself that when you were going through traumas that you had no idea about, and that somehow your spirit or your higher self or soul identity is present with you, trying to send you messages to either A, get out of a harmful situation, or B, heal yourself. um, so yeah, it was pretty, that was, it's like, it was very self-empowering for me to discover that about myself, right?
oh
Yeah.
yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we could go more into your spiritual healing and exploration, or we could go more into your trauma. It's up to you.
Oh, it's up to me. um, well, here's another experience that I had. uh, I went to theater school. uh, part of my training was theater school for a couple of years. And during theater school, we did dance therapy, we did art therapy, music therapy, all this kind of thing. And a few years prior, I had a memory that I never had before. Um, so I'm 61 years old, and I, having gone through teenage trauma, and then in my home where I grew up, and then as well, when I left home, I entered a very abusive relationship. There's two things I want to share, which are super
Okay.
cool. Another awakening point. Um, so, I was molested as a teenager, and I couldn't wait to get out of home. And so and I was very
Mm.
smart. And so I got a scholarship, and a scholarship to move to another city and go to university in another town. So I went. I was like, my opportunity to get out of the house. So I grabbed the scholarship and went. But coming straight out of an abusive situation, within a month, I was in another abusive situation.
Why do you think that was?
Well, initially, I think I was just really lonely, and I didn't know how to connect with the girls that I was in college with, any of the students. I couldn't really connect to them, and I was missing all my friends that I grew up with. And so it was a huge, very huge dramatic change. So I started hanging out at the local park. And so meeting a
Okay.
little bit of the riffraff that hung out at the local park. And so I became friend with a variety of homeless people. And the homeless people, this was in 1976. So the homeless people and the homeless situation was nothing like what it is now. It was more young kids just who had run away from home, or they were just kind of playing. It wasn't as heart-wrenching and dramatic as it is now, and at least from my understanding.
Right.
Yeah. And so yeah, I was just lonely, and I met this fellow, and um, I kind of knew that it wasn't a good idea. Something inside of me knew it wasn't a good
But you
idea,
ignored it.
but I ignored it. Yeah. Yeah. We tend to ignore these little nudges that are telling us not a good idea. So anyway, I quickly started living. Within a month, I was living with this guy. I was 17 years old. He was 24, and he wasn't, he wasn't physically abusive in that he didn't punch me or hit me, but he was very psychologically abusive. And very interesting thing happened is that while I was walking around this apartment that where I lived with this fellow, I was like walking around and like, what have I got myself into? And I realized there was kind of like this thought somewhere around my head that I'm in a situation where I have to be cautious and perhaps afraid for my safety, and I have to look out for myself. And I thought, oh my God, this is the exact same way I used to think when I lived at home. Like I was 17 and I realized that how did I thought I brought my thoughts with me from my house. And I can change my thoughts.
Is it
That
linked
was
to the law of attraction though?
probably, I mean, it was a huge awakening for me
That
that I
you
had
influence your own thoughts. You're not just trapped by them.
that I'm not just trapped by them, right?
Yeah. Um, that's quite a big thing, that
It was a
realization.
very big thing when I was in the situation that's abusive, and my thoughts are, I'm becoming aware of my thoughts that that it's not me, and that my thoughts were somehow a cause of the situation I was in. And so from that moment, I was planning my escape from this abusive situation without being abused more, which included a lot of manipulation and further trauma, and very you know scary. Actually, ended up being a very, very scary situation. Um, but it took a lot of stealth and sharp thinking and manipulation because I was basically alone and I didn't trust adults and I didn't have anyone that I could trust.
Right. And he was manipulative himself.
He was manipulative and mean and controlling and an alcoholic, and volatile. Um, he had a brother that was in jail for murder. He had another brother that was in jail for beating up a baby. Um, and those were foster brothers, by the way. And then he had another brother that had just gotten out of jail for armed robbery. So these were dangerous people. He was a dangerous person. And so I really felt that I had to be as sharp as possible to get out of that situation. So luckily I got out, and I ended up, getting over myself, thinking that I could handle it all. And I ended up phoning the police. But this was months later, after I had moved out from living with him. He was stalking me. He had kidnapped me and kept me confined for another number of days.
Oh
He
dear.
ex- yeah, he extorted all my money out of me. And then I finally phoned the police. Then I finally got help. And that was, calling for help is was a big, big thing for me. And the funny thing, if you relate that to spiritual practice or spiritual awakening, asking for help, it's amazing how quickly the help can come if you just open your mouth and ask for it.
Yeah.
So I finally asked for help. I got help. The situation resolved. I moved on with my life. Yeah. Yeah.
So this has definitely has a spiritual aspect to it as well. So around this sort of time, or when you had these traumas, what sort of spiritual exploration did you do?
None. At that time, none. I was a kid. I was 17, 18 years old. I did a little bit of yoga. That's really about it. I didn't really do any spiritual exploration until a few years later. I started a spiritual exploration. Yeah.
Okay, so on your first on the video on the podcast episode you've done so far, you mentioned
Yeah.
disassociation experiences.
Yes, absolutely. That, funny thing, I think I believe now that it relates to both my sexual traumas, but also I also believe I had a health problem that I didn't know about. But yes, it's a very uh, it's a very common, and almost every single person that has a sexual trauma dissociates, meaning that their consciousness leaves their body at the time of the trauma, so that they're not consciously present with it. Right? Yeah. And so dissociation becomes a common escape mechanism from not only trauma, that when it's happening at the time, but later in life, any triggers that might bring up the memory. So, and dissociation becomes a safe place for your mind or your emotions or yourself to go to. It's like the go-to place in your consciousness that, in a way, you're trying to protect yourself. Right? It's a protection mechanism.
Could you give some examples?
Um, well, if you're, a very harsh one, if you're being raped, you kind of blank out. You blank out. You have no memory of it. Um, and y- y- where are you? You don't even know. And then you kind of come to later and you go, oh my God, what happened? Uh, and then later in life, what might cause you to dissociate is, you're in an argument with somebody, and the person all of a sudden reminds you of, they yell at you, oh, why don't you just shut up? They try and silence you, and you're kind of shocked back into that old trauma. Um, I'm dissociating right now, trying to think of trying to think of examples of dissociation.
Uh, sorry.
My mind went blank. But here's an example later in life, which is fascinating for me, because I went through spiritual exploration,
Right.
and I found a spiritual path that opened my heart and helped me heal all of these things. And then I thought I was healed. And so I wrote a letter to everyone in my family and shared my the experience with them and said, hey man, this is what happened to me.
Wow, that's quite a big step.
A very big step. I was in my 30s, and one of my sisters came to me and said, oh, you know what do you remember? And I said, well, I remember, it starting when I was around 11 years old. And she said, oh, well, then you don't remember everything. I'm like, what do you
Oh,
mean? And I didn't know, I didn't know what I didn't know. I didn't remember what you don't remember. And so uh, shortly after that, I think, within a few months, some old memories started coming up about traumas. Something happened to me when I was 4 or 5 years old. And so again, I went through another healing process around that. And later, a really cool spiritual experience happened to me around remembering this trauma when I was 5. I think I was 4.5 or 5 years old. Was later when I was in theater school and I was doing dance therapy and art therapy and music therapy, there was a therapist that came to our school, and she did a specific technique very similar to somatic energy work, and it was called it's called using the felt sense. So the felt sense is trying to track within your own body your memories. So we were in a big room. It was a huge dance hall, and she was talking me through. I was laying on the floor. I was the only one there, plus her, and it was a huge dance space. And she was talking me through uh, soft, very subtle feelings in my body and trying to find an energetic pathway to memories. And she told me, as you're feeling this, you can express it through movement in this dance space. So I started moving around the dance space, not very much, but she was guiding me and following me through this. And uh, in the experience, I felt myself like I was in a big barrel and I was tumbling around on the floor. And I was in this closed barrel and I couldn't breathe. And all of us, and she's guiding me to break out of this barrel. Like I felt like I was in a barrel and I was just, you know, curled up in there. And then she guided me to break out of the barrel. And as I did this, I had a, I felt like I had popped out of my body, and I had a memory of being out of my body, um, flying above my house where I grew up. I was about 4 or 5 years old. I looked down, I could see the grass, I could see the swing set and the trees and this house that I was living in. Plus, there was a pig pen, like where the pigs lived, and there was another little house. I could see all the ground below me.
That's amazing.
And I was in this space of the sky, and I thought, wow, this is beautiful. And I looked to my side, and there was like an angelic being up in the space, up in the sky with me, holding my hand.
So what does it look like? Just like,
It was like a flowing kind of robe that was sort of white and pink and light little bits of pink and blue and green, and sort of this beautiful being with beautiful eyes holding my hand.
wow.
And I don't know that I was talking verbally, but I know that I was saying, I don't want to go back. I don't want to go back. I'm not going back. I'm not going back in that body. I don't want to go back there. And, this being just kind of covered me with love and just said to me, uh, uh, I will always be with you, or something like that. And then, then I was back in my body. And um, what I realized that this is what happened. I had just been uh, sexually assaulted, and during the sexual assault, I dissociated, left my body, was out in space, had this experience with this angel being, and then came back in my body and didn't remember the sexual experience at all, didn't remember what had happened, but was felt like it felt like I was in a big, the feeling for me as a child was that I was in a big, the a big ball of like soft bubbles or something like that.
Huh.
Like it was very sort of ethereal feeling. It wasn't a very grounded feeling. And then, you know, uh, and then I went on my merry way running around the house as a kid. And I never remembered that, never remembered the abuse, never remembered this spiritual experience until I was much older.
Wow. That's
And when it's like when I had that memory, it's like, oh my God, I it makes you look. It made me look at my memories of my childhood and my teenage years very so differently. You know, it made me realize that I was being protected, even though I was going through traumas.
that's comforting.
Isn't that amazing?
That is.
Yeah.
Maybe we all have that, or potentially do. Maybe.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I believe every single one of us has a spiritual guardian.
So, what exactly is a spiritual guardian?
Uh, are you familiar with any of the work by Michael Newton?
No.
He's Michael Newton is a psychologist who did hypnotherapy. And during the process of doing hypnotherapy, he people started going into you know because doing hypnotherapy, he would go into their past and try and find memories that were causing their problems for today, kind of thing. And he started crossing over. People started spontaneously sharing experiences uh, of of before um, of before being born. And so he started developing this, and he's written a few books on it, and he started actually focusing on uh, hypnotherapy sessions where people remembered life before life, not past
Right.
lifetimes, you know, not past
In
lifetimes, but
between?
the time between lives. And his books, he describes how these people have how people have one or two or three or a number of spiritual guides or spiritual guardians that they that you consult with before entering your life. So yes, I believe that a spiritual guardian is a spiritual being, possibly no different than us, but without a physical body, and live in the spiritual worlds. That's where their home is, and their offering or their service in life is to be guides or guardians for for um, other spiritual beings and us who are like trapped in our physical bodies. So yes, I don't know how else to describe a spiritual guardian. And their spiritual guardians are all levels of they're all levels of spiritual advancement.
Yeah, there's different levels of
Yeah,
frequency, right?
they're different frequency. There's more advanced souls and there's less advanced souls. Yeah.
Yeah, that's definitely something I'm aware of. Are you aware of the law of one?
The law of one. No, what's that about?
Well, there's similar ideas out there, but there's the idea that everything in the universe is all one whole,
Mm-hmm.
and that there's an infinite creator that created all of it.
Mm-hmm.
And there's like 7 different levels of
Mm-hmm.
reality or
Mm-hmm.
densities that
Mm-hmm.
go from the bottom being like going all the way from like just basically objects to animals to like our level of sentience, the level of love above that, uh, level of wisdom above that, and then the top level. But then it keeps on going infinitely, right? So that each it keeps going smaller and it keeps going bigger in a sort of as above, so below sort of way.
Okay, I see.
It's a bit like I think yoga talks about similar sort of stuff, and Buddhism and Hinduism do talk about similar themes. To do it talks about reincarnation as well,
Yeah, it's
based
very
on
similar,
channeled work.
based on channeled work describing the law of one. Well, it's very similar to the spiritual path that I follow,
What is it?
that basically says there is, I guess, a plane of consciousness where everything, where duality no longer exists.
Yeah.
And in that place of consciousness where duality no longer exists, there are also even more subtle and beautiful spiritual planes. So in my spiritual tradition, we believe that each of us is soul, right? And
Yeah.
you as soul, you are made up of light energy and sound energy. And
Right.
so soul incarnates into a physical body, but soul could also incarnate into an astral body, which is the astral plane, which is kind of associated with the emotional body that we identify as. And soul can also incarnate into a causal body and a mental body and an etheric body. But here in the physical world, soul is incarnated into the physical body. But as soul, to get into the physical body, we also have an astral, a causal, a mental, an etheric body as well. And that all of these different bodies allow us to partake in that realm. So our physical body allows us to partake in the physical realm, right? Our astral body allows us to partake in the astral realm. Our causal body allows us to partake in the causal realm. The causal realm is like the memory body, the realm of memories.
Wow.
And then our mental body allows us to partake in the mind body, in the mental realm, where thoughts exist. And the etheric body allows us to partake in the etheric realm, which is between the mind and soul. It's kind of like the intuitive body. So that's what my tradition believes. And then the oneness occurs at the soul level. But
Right.
it's not really oneness, because we are individual beings of light and sound energy.
Oh, by the way, I'm going to edit
Yeah.
this bit out, but I need to go to the loo, and I'll
Okay.
just mark down the timing. So give me a bit.
Yeah, sorry. Okay. Did you pause?
Oh, we can pause it. But don't worry, I've written down the timing, so I don't need to pause. I can just
Okay. Yeah,
use it.
I'll take a break too.
All right.
Yeah,
Right,
thanks.
I'll be back. All right. In about a minute or so, or very soon, we're going to go back to it. Right.
Excuse me.
So, do you remember where you were?
Sorry?
Do you remember where you were?
Uh yeah, I was just,
Oh, the different realms and stuff.
Yes, there are.
Oh,
Yeah, I was talking about soul having the ability to be in the physical body, but also the ability to travel the God worlds, really, what we call the God worlds, or the worlds beyond duality. Yeah.
okay. So
Hmm.
I'll say let's continue and then like give it like 10 seconds and then,
Sure.
all right, let's continue.
So, yeah, in my spiritual tradition, our focus is on my identity as soul. And so, in that, we do spiritual practice, um, which is not especially meditation. It's more contemplation. What we do, we work with the sound. So we do chanting, almost like sound toning. Are you familiar with sound toning at all?
You mean like Om and the other sounds?
Yeah, Om. Om is one of the sounds, but sound toning is it's just sound toning is using different sounds, like um even in I remember we used to do sort of these kinds of practices in theater school when you're learning how to open up your voice, and then we would just do out the nose. We'd try and send the sound out our nose, with like "ee," and we do these things where we, you try to um, open up the whole channel of your voice. Eventually in
Hmm.
theater you learn how to speak from your belly, right? But
Right.
you try and do soul sounds.
Fun.
You try and do deep sounds. But different sounds have different they tune us into different spiritual vibrations. So the
Oh, yeah.
main one that I chant is not Om. Om is associated with the third eye. The ones that I do are associated more with the crown chakra. Shabda yoga is one of the yogas that talks about the sound current. Shabda yoga is the yoga of the sound current, really. And it's not a yoga that's talked about very much. Shabda, Shabda. So yeah, so we do chanting. And it's not chanting like Tibetan chanting or Hare Krishna chanting. It's not that kind of thing at all. It's usually very specific words and the sounds of the words that we repeat, that we go over and over again. Almost like the Zikr. Have you heard of the Zikr?
No, you've mentioned a lot of things I haven't heard of, which is good.
The Zikr. It's a Sufi term, I believe.
Oh, right. Yeah, they're quite spiritual though, right? Definitely.
And the Zikr is a repeating of a name of God, basically. And so, yeah, so we use the word Hu, and it's an ancient name for God. But it also has a very powerful sound quality, like that. And so that opens the third eye, but it also opens the crown center.
Well, thanks
And
for opening the audience's third eye. If it were that
yeah,
simple.
if it were that simple. You asked me if there's a easy way to have a spiritual experience or open the third eye. I don't know if there is. In our practice, one of the techniques is called the easy way. And believe me, I tried it for months and it wasn't easy.
It was just easier, right?
Well, it's easy in description. The description is easy. Oh, you just lay there, just do this, and you can leave your body.
The
I
easy
don't
way
think
to
so.
read it, right? So moving on, I've
Sure.
let's explore the chakras and the spirit body and energy body, how they interact with sexuality.
Well, the sex center is the second chakra. So maybe your listeners, I think if anyone's exploring spirituality, they're gonna already have discovered the chakras, right?
Uh,
Uh,
Probably, yeah.
7 energy centers: the root chakra, the sex center, the belly center, the heart center, the throat, the third eye, and the crown. 7 major chakras. So, how do they relate? Well, Tantra is a spiritual practice. One of the spiritual practices that I do, and I use some techniques from Tantra in my healing practice, my healing business. And Tantra embraces sexuality, where so many spiritual traditions don't embrace sexuality. Uh, and so your sexual energy or your sexual life becomes it's an integration of your sexual life with your spiritual life, really. Because some of the practices in Tantra are a meditation, for example, that you might do would be envisioning a white light in your third eye. Okay. And then you envision a beautiful red glow in your sexual center or in your root chakra. So if you see this white light in your third eye and you see a beautiful red energetic ball in your root chakra, and then you take a few minutes and enjoy those two different energies, the white and the beautiful red ball, and then you imagine the white coming down from your third eye to your throat and landing in your heart. And then you imagine the red coming up from your root and your sexual center up through your belly and landing in your heart, and seeing those two energies meet in your heart. And when they meet in your heart, what do you experience?
It's like they're swirling in pink.
A swirling pink energy, right? And so you breathe into that pink energy and you just allow it to be and open your heart. This is one of the meditations, a chakra meditation for Tantra practice.
Honestly, I just tried it. I didn't really do it thoroughly or in a full-on meditative way, but I
Yeah,
experienced something.
yeah.
It's nice.
It doesn't take much to experience something. Um, so this is an example of a chakra um, meditative practice, and then a chakra energy practice might be standing and body shaking your body, and you would kind of just wobble your knees back and forth and back and forth, and then you start swaying your hips back and forth and back and forth, and then you bring in some breathing, ha ha ha, so you're ha, or you might do other breathing techniques, ha ha ha, or while you're shaking your body and you're trying to get some energy building up. So this is an example of while you're shaking your body and waking up the chakras with body shaking and letting go, letting go, letting go of energy. And then you might do it a bit softer. You would do that for 15 minutes, and then you would do it softer for another 15 minutes. More la 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 movement, not really shaking, just sort of moving, and nice full breathing.
Very intuitive.
And then you would stop and feel that energy going through your whole body for 15 minutes, and you would calm right down, but then you would be fully energized through your whole body. And the actual shaking is waking up your root chakra the root chakra is at your tip of your tailbone. And then from your root chakra, waking your sexual center and your belly and your breath and your heart, and allowing that up to open so that your mind is you actually let your mind go in that practice. You don't even think in your mind at all.
So, what happens if both partners do that before sex?
Like your release, it's a release practice. Like, what's our typical way of engaging in sex? Especially a couple knows each other, they might just sit and talk about their whole day, like just ramble on and let go of their whole day, or talk about their kids or whatever. And then they might start, then once that's gone and they can focus on each other, they'll start doing some romantic interaction, right? But in Tantra, if you do that first, if you do kind of a releasing and a letting go of everything that's stuck in your body, it's much easier to be present with your partner. You know, and you can do what's stuck in your body. Then you can do talk therapy, what we call heart of relating practice, where you, heart of relating means using your heart to acknowledge what's happening in your body, expressing it and letting it go. So instead of doing the body shaking thing, you might do, oh, my neck is really sore today. You know, I just need to move my neck around a little bit. And it's been really irritating me. But now if I shake it off, you know, and I notice that, you know, is a bit emotionally frustrating for me, that my neck gets stressed out. And then you kind of move your neck around and release your neck, and then you can let go of it. So heart of relating is finding something in your body. It's like, oh, my knee is sore, the way it's sitting. Okay, I just have to adjust my knee. Okay, now I feel better because my knee is comfortable. So heart of relating is connecting what's happening in your body to what you're feeling, and then letting it go so that you could be more present with your partner. So these are two different kinds of practices so that you can be present with your partner. And of course, when you enter a sexual experience with your partner, you are entering a kind of a trance state, right? And the trance starts to happen when you allow you start reacting to each other's pheromones, the attraction that you have to the other person, and then you start, hormones start flowing. And when hormone levels change in your body, your brain waves change, right? When your brain waves change, you start to enter a different kind of consciousness. It's a little bit of a trance state.
You
And
mean
everyone,
generally, or when you do this method?
no, I mean, everyone enters a bit of a trance state when they enter a sexual experience.
Right.
I mean, your hormone levels all change. It's a natural thing that happens, right? But by doing Tantra practice, what happens naturally, you bring it into conscious awareness. And you can do things to extend that, right? So to to enhance that experience, to enhance the pleasure experience that you're going to have with your partner. I mean, it can be as simple as having beautiful music playing, being in a beautiful environment that's very comforting and relaxing to the whole body, so that you can easily let go of everything. Um, so yeah, there's a lot to be said about bringing awareness of your chakras into your sexual experience with your partner. Yeah.
Sounds like there's a lot of you could really help with people's sex lives and their relationships.
And their relationships. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's key there, because it's not just about,
It's not just
there's
about sex.
life is
Yeah.
about love, and yeah, that's a key part of it.
It's about relationship, isn't it? Like
Hmm.
in many, many ways. Relationship with ourselves and relationship with our partners, with our loved ones, with our family. Um, yeah. Mm.
So in your first episode, you mentioned past life memories.
Oh, yes.
Would you like to talk about that?
What can I talk about? Past life memories. I did. I mentioned past life memories. I don't remember saying that.
Really? I don't know where I got that impression, or something about.
I probably did. Yeah, I probably did. Well, what I can say about past life memories, there's three ways you can have past life memories. One is by going to a hypnotherapist who's skilled at regressing someone, and skilled at opening the door to past lives. And another one is through dream practice, like asking your spiritual guides or asking your higher self, or convincing your higher self that you're psychologically strong enough to handle the information, um,
Hmm.
to have a dream experience that will awaken you to a past life, um, or through personal contemplative and spiritual meditative practices where you are either uh, uh, where you're asking, you know, the thing about, if you want to have a past life experience, you have to ask for it, number one. And just because you ask doesn't mean it's given either, but the possibility of it coming um, is a lot higher if you're asking and asking and asking. Because past life like our when we come into this life, there's a veil
Yeah.
that prevents us from remembering. And the veil is very thin when we're a young child. And so you'll hear a lot of stories about young children, usually when they start having language around 2, 3 years old. So that time period between 2 or 3 and 5 years old is when past life memories can be alive. And then once the child starts getting more teeth, their teeth start changing. Like, that's a major change in the psychological and spiritual development of a child, when their baby teeth fall out and they start getting their adult teeth. And that's around the time that the consciousness, the veil, starts shutting down, where they lose the memories of their past lives. And this veil protects us, and it allows us to focus in our present human life. Like, we couldn't function if we remembered all these past lives all the time. We just couldn't function. So the veil is, with many people, it's a very hard and strong, and you know, their mind is very focused in their physical life. And then with other people, it's thinner. Um,
And traumatic experiences can make it get thinner. Is that true?
the traumatic experiences will pop you on the other side of the veil. That's why you don't remember them.
Ah, right.
Mhm.
So,
That's what dissociation is. You're popping on the other side of your own veil.
so do you have interesting memories from previous lives?
From past lives,
Yeah.
I guess I could share one. I mean, uh, at a certain time in my life, I really, really, really felt like I couldn't survive um, unless I had a direct, real, and true understanding that God was real and that I did have a spiritual guide. Like, I was in such a state of desperation. This was in my 20s when I was
Right.
going through, I actually, um, had some addictive behaviors in my 20s, which is dissociation and addiction. And during that time, I was like, I need to know that God is real. I can't survive without it. In my heart, I really needed that. And I don't know why I brought up that memory. Sorry. There's a link to that. I did have a very powerful past life memory during that time that made me aware of why I why I was in why I had had abuse. Not, it didn't really explain. I wouldn't say that it explained why I had abuse in this life, but it explained why I was an addict. Really, I was severely bulimic, and I believe that that's a severe addiction. And so this past life memory made me aware of a root cause of why I was an addict in this life. And
Wow.
and it was very powerful for me. And I, you know, because I wasn't strong spiritually at the time, you know, I was actually in an addictive state, but I was struggling and to get myself out of it. And so when I went to bed at night, I would just say to God or spirit, it's like, my spiritual guardian at the time. By this time, I had met a couple of spiritual guardians that were with me. And so at bedtime, I would say, I can handle it. I can handle it. I can handle it. Please tell me. Please show me. What is the cause of this? Why am I like this? What's causing me to be an addict like this? Why? And I really needed to know why. And I went every night, I went to bed saying, please tell me, please tell me, please tell me. And then finally I had this dream, and I was like, I'm fully aware of it. And in the dream, now I don't know if you want me to share it or not, but in the dream, it showed me a very dark entity that I was attached to, and that I had channeled in a previous life.
Right.
And it was back.
In
And
this life.
yeah.
Okay. So
Well, I
he's
don't know if it
a
was
real.
back. I don't know if it was back in this life, but it was showing me that it was a previous lifetime. So for me, in my dreams,
Okay.
whenever a house that I don't recognize shows up in my dream, it's showing me a previous lifetime.
Okay.
Whenever a house, I'll say that again, when in my personal symbology, because everyone in their dreams has their own symbology. So in my personal symbology, whenever a house that I didn't recognize showed up in my dream, it was to me representing a previous life. And this entity lived in that life, in that house. And in the dream, it was sucking me into it. It was trying to suck me back. It was trying to suck me into that house. It was trying to suck me. And so I started calling out for my spiritual guide, help, help, help. In the dream, I was alert enough to ask for help in the dream. And this spiritual being showed up and pulled me away from it.
That's
Pulled,
really powerful.
and I was literally laying out flat, and my feet were being sucked behind me into this house, and the spiritual master was pulling me from the front of my body,
Right.
and I was being pulled, and I went, and because I was focusing on this master, I ended up being pulled away with him, away from this being. And then I woke up.
Wow.
And I was like, oh my God. And I couldn't sleep for I was in shock,
Okay.
because the feeling of this entity was so strong and so visceral that I was actually in shock
Did it
for
have
2 or 3 days. And I couldn't sleep for a couple of days.
like a disgusting aura?
Oh, very much so. A very disgusting aura. It was probably 20 feet tall. And it had, the energy around it was like draping fabric, draping energy streams of gray and dark. And it had like muddy energy. I don't want to
Yeah,
describe it.
actually, yeah.
I don't think it's
Let's
good
not
to
go into
focus
more
on that.
detail.
I don't think it's good to focus on that.
Well, some people might be interested in that sort of thing, but what's more interesting to me right now is what's the important things for how people can understanding their own dreams and potentially past lives, or at least understanding what the themes in their dreams are and how to learn that. Are there techniques or therapies that help you with that?
Well, in my spiritual practice, I study Eckankar. Have you heard of Eckankar?
No.
No, it's a spiritual teaching, and one of the things they teach is one of the things we teach for a couple of years is dream study. So, but there are a lot of teachings about dream study. Um, lucid dreaming is a popular thing to learn. So you have to, in learning dream study, you have to practice writing down your dreams. You have to practice giving yourself mental instructions before you go to sleep. You have to practice calming your mind, calming yourself, so that you can accept what comes in the dream. And you have to practice writing them down, like in the middle of the night. If you have a dream, scribble it down. Even if you have to have a dream journal beside your bed and scribble it down. And then in the morning, you can write as much as you can. It can be very time consuming, actually, dream recollection practice. Yeah, but it's one of the tools that I use in my life. Yeah. Something about dream study is that the fascinating thing about it is the layers that you can go through in dream study, in exploring your own spiritual worlds. Because it's not just psychological mumbo jumbo, right? Once you get through the psychological mumbo jumbo, because that's a general process, because dreams help you clear stuff. They have so much value in our life, they help clear our days. They help recover from problems. They help with insights. If we have a math problem we can't figure out, we might discover it in our dreams. Like, it's a whole field. It's really a whole field of exploration. Yeah.
Wow. So yeah, it sounds like a lot of people could benefit from that.
Well, I know that I did. I mean, I don't do as deep a dream practice as I used to. Yeah. Another way that I had a past life memory was through hypnotherapy. I did have hypnotherapy one time, and I did recall a past life. And that was really cool for me. But just knowing, I think just knowing that if you have one or two experiences of past lives, in a way, that's all you really need, because life is meant to be lived in the present. And if you have a specific problem that's connected to a past life, and learning about that past life, understanding that past life will help you to overcome the problem, then a spiritual guide will help you open the door to that past life. Yeah.
So in our society, there's a lot of division. There's a lot of in politics and economics, and
I know.
so you, with your expertise in spirituality and the chakras, like, what insight do you have about different dynamics you get and what the changes that we're going through?
Well, I think, for one, as we explore a spiritual understanding of ourselves, and if everyone on the planet was to do that, can you imagine? Then
Yeah.
then we get a deeper understanding of society.
So do you think a lot of the
And
issues come from a lack of understanding of each other and what's going on?
in a way, yes. One thing about the planet, one thing that you learn in spiritual, on a spiritual path, is that we are spiritual beings having a human experience.
Yeah.
And that if you do come to the place of believing in past lives, then you start to understand, oh, I've lived many hundreds of past lives. And then you start to understand, well, everyone else around me, some people have only lived 2 or 3 lives, and some people have lived thousands of lives. So on Earth, the wide variety of consciousness is incredible. So things that I went through maybe 200 lifetimes ago, somebody else is only going through right now. So with this understanding, you can have a lot more compassion for people, and you can understand the warring mentality on this planet. You know, the warring mentality is a lower consciousness state that all these souls are in. It doesn't make them less of a soul. It simply means they have less experience.
Right. So does that also apply to, well, what about when people are getting into spirituality? Sometimes, well, I have this idea that ideology is somewhat linked to identity and ego, right? And that spirituality can involve letting that go, but not everyone, but I guess it takes time to do that, right? And do you have any insight about how we can help people let go of divisive attachments, like, the us versus them mentality and that sort of thing?
Sorry, the what kind of mentality?
Us versus them and
Oh, us versus
that sort of
them.
thing.
Well, if there's an us versus them on the grand scale, you can see it as, the war. On politically, it's the right versus the left.
Suppose that's a
And
hmm.
sorry?
Oh, carry on, carry
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of us and them. Um, sorry, what's the question?
on. It was a little bit rambly, wasn't it?
Well, no, yeah, it's making the connection between spiritual belief and understanding and how somebody strongly holds on to their ideology. Is that
Well, I'll give you an example to talk about what I have in mind and the issue that I feel like has exists, right? So I'll give you two case studies, I guess. One is, for example, QAnon. What's interesting about QAnon is that on one hand, it's sort of this spiritual awakening thing, but on the other hand, it's very political, very much got an ideological bias and a host of blind spots, probably. Maybe they've got some good points and maybe they've got some bad points, but definitely that's one side of political spectrum, and it involves spirituality. And to me, it's a pity that people who are getting into spirituality haven't entirely let go of divisive mentalities as opposed to being in unity. And on the other hand, you get some people who are into progressive ideas, so to speak, who they might have a lot of fear or resentment about the right themselves. On both sides, there's this fear and resentment, and not everyone in the spiritual community has gotten over it. And certainly in society as a whole, we've got a lot of that. I'm just wondering, how do we heal that collectively?
that's a big thing to tackle.
Yeah.
Very, very big thing to tackle. Um, I think first you have to start with yourself. A friend of mine teaches this a set of systems called the 5 spaces, the 5 communication spaces. So you see yourself first, it's a one-on-one space. It's just you and yourself. And then there's, no, sorry, the personal space is the first space. It's
Right.
just you and yourself. And then one-on-one, it's you with another person. And then the group space is you and your family, or you in an environment where there's 3 or more people. And then there's community space, which is you in the greater space. So, and those are 4 spaces: personal, one-on-one, group, and community. And we go in and out of these all the time. But the one space that can permeate all of them is sacred space. And so I think we have to practice bringing sacred space into all of our communications, bringing sacred space into our relationship with ourselves, bringing sacred space into our one-on-one relationships, bringing sacred space into group and bringing sacred space into community.
And what does that
So,
do?
pardon
Oh,
me,
what does that do if we do that? How does it
it
help?
makes people become aware of God. You know, even if, like, this, for example, this most recent talk, an advertisement that created by the Donald Trump campaign, right?
Right.
He talks about how great America has and all the great people, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The great people that created the United States and how fantastic it is as a country. I mean, it's, in a way, it's really quite an illusion because the United States is in really a big mess in many ways. But at the end, he talks about God and this trust in God and this faith in God. And he sees all of us as equal under God. And I think that's really important that we come to collective respect of each other's spiritual or religious path.
Yeah, that's important.
That's a big one, and that's, to me, on the social realm, in the big collective, that's the main thing. It's like, if you're a Muslim, I have to respect your love of Allah, you know, and your ideology, because are you going to change it? Probably not. So what, am I going to fight against you my whole life? What a waste of time. So we have to come to respect each other's spiritual path, wherever they may be at on their spiritual path.
I suppose this is where fear gets involved, isn't it? Because, for example, on the right, there's this big fear of Islam, and it relates to immigration as well, and it's quite a big issue. And when we get people who refuse to budge either way, it just becomes worse and worse. Whereas if people try to compromise in some way, maybe we can,
Well,
yeah,
when you go into fear, you're going into your lower chakras, your unhealed lower chakras. Fear is a natural response that comes out of the root chakra. And the purpose of fear is to alert us of danger, right?
right.
And when fear is, when the danger is not real or not physical, and we don't resolve that fear, it comes up the chakras, it comes up and invades the heart center.
Right.
Like they say that fear and anger is another one. These are lower chakra energies that are meant to help us in our life.
Right.
Anger is really misplaced assertiveness. Because,
Ah,
right,
yeah.
anger is misplaced assertiveness because your boundaries are broken and you're not a whole being. You're not able to assert your own identity. And so the assertiveness becomes misplaced and it turns into anger. So fear in our collective, you know, when people enter fear, they're going into unhealed lower chakras that has infiltrated basically their heart center.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. And I've been looking at politics for a long time. Well, for my age anyway. Um, and one thing one dynamic I've noticed is that you have one group, they feel threatened by this other group. They feel like there's this threat that that group is being attacked. So they feel like, right, I'm standing up for myself, right? So they might go on these protests or these, or they go and confront it verbally or maybe even with violence. Then the other group, they feel the same way, right? But neither side is actually considering that because they're too caught up in their fight or flight responses.
That's right.
That's a real problem, and it,
It's a real problem of our unhealed society. And this is one of the reasons that I believe healing our sexual self will help heal society.
oh,
Our sexual self comes out of our root chakra and our sexual center.
that's a key part of
It's
the root
highly
chakra,
key,
right?
very. Uh, yeah, well, the root chakra is on a society level, the root chakra is survival of the one, survival of the single person. And so it's our basic human psychology is locked in that root chakra. Everything you do is is related to survival of yourself. So it's your sense of security and safety, physical security and physical safety on the earth, on the ground. And it's your impulse to breathe, it's your impulse to eat, it's your impulse to survive. um, when you're drowning, you can't drown yourself if you know how to swim, or you can't drown yourself in the bathtub, because your automatic system is gonna force you to get out of the water and breathe. So, and that comes down from your root chakra of survival of the self. And then your second chakra, the sexual center, is survival of the species. It's everything that you do in relation to procreation. And so it's all your innate uh, female responses and urges, such as nurturing, taking care of the children, um, making yourself beautiful so that you will attract the perfect mate, so that you will procreate the ideal human. It's everything to do with survival of the species. Even on the man side, everything that, now these are very basic, right?
Is it
But
like
it's
basic competition with other guys on how to impress women, that sort of thing?
absolutely, a man needs to know where he stands in relationship to other men, because he needs to plot his course so that he can go get the food and bring the food home to the woman and child. He's the, so that's all and that's a lot of power with money, power over other men, and dominance with your female mate. All of this basic stuff sits in your sexual center.
Right. So if there's an imbalance there in these lower two or low three chakras, and in society widely, and we have,
Absolutely.
and if we have that, might that affect politics? For example, I mean, generally, but maybe relating to when it relates to men and women, like, for example,
Well,
feminism and
that urge
anti-feminism, and that sort of,
the urge
yeah,
the
that sort
urge
of thing.
yeah, for sure, the urge to pursue power, the urge to even pursue politics and be in a powerful position, the urge to pursue a lot of money, that comes out of the sexual center. Um,
What do you say the main imbalance for men is, like, in terms of chakra, the lower levels?
the main imbalance in men,
Yeah.
um, well, honestly, from a very physical point of view, I think circumcision is the worst thing to happen to men. It starts right as they're born. Um, uh, to me, all kinds of problems stem out of this physical trauma that occurs to young babies, young boys, that lasts their whole lifetime. It affects it affects how they see themselves sexually. It affects um, like essentially who they are, because they're losing a huge number of nerves in a very key part of their body. And so they're losing a level of sensitivity,
Mm.
not only for themselves, but for their mate, for their partner.
And do you think that goes beyond physical? It's another aspect of
Well, it
sensitivity as
affects
well.
their psychology. Everything, any kind of trauma that occurs to the body affects your psychology.
Makes me wonder why it's done on such a wide scale in America.
Well,
Almost like malevolent, deliberate, maybe.
I mean, uh, in the olden days, I suppose it was really important for physical health, because that skin, that tissue can harbor a lot of a lot of bacterial infection
I
when
suppose, but
when there's no hygiene, you know.
yeah, but people can wash. I mean, washing is not
But then it
anyway.
became yeah, but we can now, but it became very tied to religious practice,
Yeah,
and and then also to hygiene. So, but I mean, there's a lot of talk against circumcision, and it's not as widely practiced as it used to be. Um, but you have this many generations of men that have some kind of sexual trauma, and also this war thing that they have with each other. This this comes out of it's just, I don't know what else to say about that. Yeah.
well, it does sounds a bit like sexual healing, or the spiritual side of sexuality can that can actually help us with a lot of these issues in society, because of course survival and reproduction are two very key things in the root chakra, and as you said, it can invade upwards up to the heart. So
Yeah,
that's quite a helpful insight.
if it's not healed, in the Taoist teachers say that when it's not healed, it comes up and sits in your organs. Like, you'll have fear sit in your spleen and your stomach, anxiety in your stomach, anger will sit in your liver, your heart will, you know, emotional imbalance will affect your heart, like anxiety will. So all of these things come up, and the heart, which is meant to be sort of the place where we have connection to all sentient beings around the planet. Like, we have an organ that breathes in the oxygen, the air that travels around the whole planet. It's the place where we can have compassion and connection to every other living thing on our planet. And it's in a place of disease and disorder because of because the the traumas from our lower chakras have come up and darkened our heart center. So yes, I believe that healing sexual traumas is key to having a healthy society.
Yeah,
um, Very key.
that's fascinating. So another question, I'm wondering, so if a lot of people don't have open heart chakras essentially, and we've got this problem going on, might explain why a lot of people there's a lot of political and social organization on, I would say, a sacral level. This is an intuitive insight of mine. I can't really back it up, but on a at the level below the heart, the chakra below it, on that
Right.
level of things, where it's about social organization and traditions, and I might be getting some inaccuracies here. Correct me, but compared to at the heart level, there might be an understanding of everyone as a whole, whereas below that, you belong to a different one tribe or another, and there might be some sort of competition between them. And
Well,
politically, maybe people just political ideologies are kind of like tribes.
it's fascinating you say that, because are you familiar with Carolyn Mace?
No,
You pronounce it Mace, but it's spelled Myss. So she teaches spiritual anatomy. She's one of my teachers.
Caroline,
And
Caroline
Carolyn Mace, that's how you say it,
doesn't
Mace,
mean
but it's
me.
spelled Myss. And so she teaches spiritual anatomy. Um, and so yes, you're right. This chakra, the third chakra, is so from, like I said, the root chakra is survival of the one. The second chakra is survival of the species. It's all about me and the other, you know. And then the third chakra is survival of the community or the tribe
Right.
or all of your relations. It has to do with all of your interactions with anyone that you're going to have an emotional connection to. So your mother, brother, father, sister, your extended family, your community that you grew up in your school, your immediate community, and it's how you survive within your community. It sits in your belly center, right? So it's where you connect, and so you're right. The healing. There's a lot of, and if you look at society today, there's a huge amount of intestinal disorder. Um, on the energetic level, the problem with genetically modified food and and you know fertilization, chemical fertilization, and pesticides, it's hugely affecting our belly center, our third chakra, and we have so many digestive disorders. So there's the impact of the physical on the outer world, on our own physical body, and then any unhealed anger issues from our sexual traumas or our survival issues uh, are going to affect, basically, in essence, what is our emotional self,
Right.
right? Yeah. um, and we have a huge nervous system in our belly that is really sort of new in the scientific research, the vagal nervous system, what they're now calling the second brain, which is our gut instinct, or the tremendous wisdom that exists in the nervous system in and around our belly. So you're very right that also needs healing.
Yeah.
So
Another
much so.
another thing I'm wondering about. So it's essentially, if someone hasn't opened their heart chakra properly, or they've got blockages in the lower parts, maybe often the best they'll get in terms of connecting to others is they will connect with and empathize with people in the group they identify with. Now, this might be a local community or it might be an ideology. Like if they start hanging, if someone, well, I mean, it doesn't, you pick any ideology, let's say socialist, if they start hanging, if someone starts hanging around the socialist groups, well, they will identify with that group, right? But
Yes,
that means that my empathy might not extend beyond that group.
that's right.
And then they interact with other people, like, say, conservatives, they'll have their group and their empathy might not extend so much beyond that.
That's right.
And for each of these groups, and when they go into society as a whole and they've got these political interactions, I feel like no wonder there's so much fighting and disharmony, because like when we've got all these problems in society and all these imbalances, like when a lot of people don't have open hearts, it's going to play out that way. And if we can help resolve these imbalances so that on a collective level, hopefully we'll be able to come together more as a society.
It's like a huge puzzle,
Yeah.
and the only way, like, it's a huge puzzle, huge. And I think the only way to find the pieces that fit in the right places is to rise above it and have a really bigger view with that open heart. So I believe the upper four chakras are as we focus on those, that is what's going to help us solve these lower chakra problems in society. That's my belief.
I agree with you.
Yeah. So we do have to practice. We have to heal ourselves individually and collectively. Like, can you imagine if these different political groups did a group healing practice, you know,
Yeah, that would really help.
um, did a group healing practice where they, where they suss out the real root problems and then access spirit to find a solution.
That sounds really powerful.
Doesn't it?
Yeah.
Is there any way we can make this happen on the planet? I know there are advanced spiritual beings that are working towards this.
Well, I'll tell you what, we should stay in contact, and we can
Yeah. You
see if we
probably
can
would want
seek
to
higher
interview someone
guidance on
then.
this.
Yeah, try to stay in contact and access some higher guidance.
Yeah.
But I think you have an amazing platform to share, to bring some, you have an amazing insight into how to bring this together. It's not something that's common to bring political, social ideologies together with spirituality. It's brilliant, and it's really needed on our planet today. So
Thank you.
yeah, thank you.
So
We ended up talking for quite a long time.
we did, but I don't really have a problem with that.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
I mean, there's potentially other things we could go into, but maybe I could lead that to another interview with you another time. This went really
Absolutely.
well.
Yes, I appreciate that. Yeah, time to go.
Yeah, well, it was so is there any just anything else on that subject you'd like to add to sort of conclude things? Any insights that you've had?
Well, I think that last one that we just said, if there's a way that groups of ideological groups can, there's this whole thing of separating state and church. Well, how do that came upon society a long time ago. Church, you can't bring religion or spiritual practice into the state, into running the state. And I'm questioning now, was that really good for society? Maybe we do need to bring more of God into our political arena.
I suppose it depends how it's done, because some people might fear theocracy or something.
Of course.
But if we could do it in a more like yoga kind of way, perhaps that will help. So
I think
thanks.
so. Yeah. Yeah, probably. Yeah.
So thanks for everything you've shared.
Yeah. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. Yep.
And have a nice day. And
Thank you,
your
Nick.
audience, I hope you enjoyed it. So
Thank you. I did enjoy talking to you. Thank you.
goodbye.
Okay. Bye for now.